Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the I'm Telling God About This podcast.
We have arrived.
All right. I know that you've all been waiting
now.
for this. We are here officially now. We're going to talk about, and this is why you need to stick around, we're going to talk about and ask the question, how happy can you be when evil political leaders bite the bullet or suffer the crash? Was the president of Iran, did he die of fog and smoke and bad weather, or was there other things that happened that we'll find out years later? Stick around. We're going to get into it. Thanks for joining us. We're here with Tim and Nick. Josh is nursing his feet right now because of that thing with the the march. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get into it. So the big story that's going on right now is that the president of Iran, now not the supreme leader, not the Ayatollah,
right, because Iran has this ridiculous power structure, because you hear president, you think, oh, that seems like a big deal, when he's like the 8th most important person, and because like you've got the Guardian Council, like that. I'm not even making that up. That's a real thing. It's like right above the president, and then you've got the supreme leader.
That's
and of course above
title.
him is the Phoenix King, and then above that is the Galactic Empire.
The Phoenix
how would
King?
You know? No,
dude, you had me.
That's how ridiculous the Iranian form of government is. You don't even know where I started lying.
That's true.
Goodness.
That's true.
So Ibrahim Raisi, or Raisi, or Raisi, I don't know how you pronounce it, but he is the former president of Iran.
Because he's dead.
Yeah, so a little bit about him, because I think most of the questions that people have when they hear the president of Iran had died, in the American mind, we probably thought, oh wait, the leader of
that's
Iran
a big deal.
is gone? No.
Because he's basically like the Secretary of the Interior or something.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best description of it. But, like, who is he? Where did he come from? Why is this significant? What was he involved in? And a little bit background. I mean, he was part of the whole revolution in Iran in 1979 when the Ayatollah Khomeini went and came and overturned the government and basically did Sharia law and its Islamic rule. Before then, you had more Western values. It was Western living, people wearing, bikinis.
There was no,
now
like,
they're not.
Burqa wearing, yeah.
I don't think they were ever wearing bikinis.
Well, it was a lot more like
1960s.
Dubai,
There's a lot of cool videos
like culturally.
Shows the lifestyle. Yeah. Anyway, so he came to power. I think he was the president in 2021, so this was rather recently, but before that he served as a prosecutor general in Tehran from 1989 to 1994.
Isn't that when he earned
nicknamed
himself a wonderful name?
That's right, the Butcher of Tehran, because he had a role in executing thousands of political prisoners.
The term butcher identified to your name. It's like,
but like, what if you're in that era and like you're a butcher, like an actual butcher with your butcher shop in Tehran, and then he shows up and it's like, well, this brand is dead. Like,
business just got real bad.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so funny. So then that was 1988. There was this huge thing where he's just executing political prisoners.
Horrible
and then
stories.
Iran,
like rape stories, torture stories, not worth reading. I went and dived in a little bit, and I was like, this dude was the scum of the earth.
Yeah. And with the Islamic, regime kind of taking over the land, there was a lot more strict laws on Sharia law and presentation. Like, so there was
specifically
a
Shiite,
hijab and chastity law.
Is their sect.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
The increase of the influence or the requirement for hijabs and chastity laws, and there was a bunch of protests over it. And in fact, I think in 2022 there was a uprising that basically two women were arrested because they didn't follow the hijab wearing. There was Masha Armeni and Armida Garavand. and they died in custody after violating the hijab law. And so
after being arrested for inciting prostitution. How wild of a charge is that?
Yeah, because they
should be thankful you live in America, for everybody listening right now.
Right.
So then what ended up happening after that in 2022, there was this big protest. And so our guy, Raisi, was essentially in charge. He was the president of this time. And so what you saw in Iran is thousands of deaths, right? You had something like, or not thousands, but you had hundreds of deaths. You had recorded 853 executions in 2022, which was the largest single year in executions since 2015. So, it's really good to be in a country where you're able to express yourself and not be, religiously prosecuted for it. So
is anybody sad that he's dead? Right? Like that's the part of this point where it's like, okay, we're going to get to how and why he died, but hey, like, can I get excited about this? Can I
right? Like, do you, as a Christian, you have to feel a little guilty, like being like, oh, I'm sad on principle because he probably
to that
went
end,
to hell.
Guys.
Like,
to that end, did you see the amount of entities in the West that expressed condolences for his death? Like, I'm not joking.
Crazy.
Like many parties and entities,
people that were allied in receiving oil.
Yeah. Well, I think
wanted to keep their
has a lot more to do.
Our president,
I think it probably has a lot more to do with given nations how they line up on Israel.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're against Israel, you're probably going to issue that statement like as kind of a middle finger to your other geopolitical enemies. It's just my guess.
The U.S. issued a condolences statement.
Did we?
Of course they did.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Oh my! Biden was. What did they say? What did we say? Thank you for.
Yeah, let me Google it. But
you're welcome for the $6 billion that we unfroze so that you could fund the war against Iran or against Israel. But yeah, no, I mean that's really at the root of it. Nick, is the position on Israel. I think that's Tim. Sorry, that's really the root of it. Is the stance of where the world lies on or stands on the conflict in Israel and Palestine, which is, why is Israel again the center of all like controversy and war, and is it a religious thing or is it East versus West? I don't know.
I don't think there's a natural inclination amongst like people groups, nations, whatever, to create dichotomies, right? That's why sometimes people will point out, like if you look at the left and right political stuff in the United States, not all of the positions on one side are entirely internally consistent, or the other side for that matter. There's sometimes just a random, because that's where it landed first, and so it just becomes part of the polar dichotomy. So I don't think it's like, oh, it's all about Israel or whatever. I think it's just that Israel, because it was a hot button global geopolitical issue, had to end up on a side. And so the people who were already on the other side of the collection of things, are just kind of against it now by default. So
U.S. State Department, NATO, UN, Biden offered official condolences.
Yikes.
And I mean, to that end, that got a lot of heat. A lot of stuff was in the news. And yeah, I mean, so also context for those living under a rock, Iran just conducted the single largest and most aggressive attack on Israel. What was it? 2 weeks ago? A week ago, where they launched multiple drones and rockets, which were all successful. I think there was potentially one casualty, but they were all shot down by the Iron Dome system that Israel has.
Here's what I think happened there, because the speed at which those rockets were moving from Iran, and the fact that they basically announced ahead of time when they were going to do it, what it looks like that was neither Iran nor Israel actually want to get into a shooting war with each other right now. Right? Iran uses their proxies, the Houthis, the Palestinian Authority, or Hamas rather. And so basically Iran had to respond with something to pacify their hardline anti-Israel political faction, but they didn't actually want to accomplish anything. So they're like, I'm gonna shoot at you right there, and you better duck. Oh, you better not duck. I might hit you. And then Israel ducks. And Israel's like, well, we don't have to respond because you didn't accomplish anything. Iran is like, well, we attacked you, so ha, and so everybody can just go back to.
But they did by crashing the helicopter somehow. So,
do you know? Because here's the other thing about Raisi, right? Whatever his name is, he was one of 2 contenders that were likely to be the successor to the current supreme leader, right? Now there's only one, and it's Khomeini's son. I think that internal to Iran, because if you're a guy like Raisi and you just die under suspicious circumstances, the list of suspects is long, guys.
I think it's short. Yeah. It's either Israel or the U.S.
Well, I mean, even just imagine the pilot, right? Who's to say that this pilot, I mean, this is completely fabricated, right? This pilot doesn't have some personal connection in some area to, someone that the butcher of Tehran killed brutally or whatever 20 years ago, and then, decides one day that he's just going to end this guy when his number comes up to shuttle him on his helicopter.
Okay. But you're being, in my opinion, way too naive in that. Yes, it could have been the pilot, and this is all conjecture as well. But that I think is a much lower likelihood than Israel saying, "All right, 2 evils. Which one can we get rid of? We have to respond to an attack here."
I'm not saying Israel wouldn't or couldn't. Not saying that at all.
I'm putting my bet. Let it be stated here when it comes out, because this happened in the 80s, I think, with the president of Pakistan, where there was an accident with a plane, and then 8 years later it was like, oh, yeah, no, we have now evidence that showed that it was an assassination. Here's my bet. Israel did it, and because Israel is really good at killing people, per this conversation. I'm not kidding. The history of Mossad, the history of Mossad and Israel taking out people is long. And they are not afraid to do stuff like that. They're one of the most ruthless, cutthroat intelligence agencies that exists, and they are not beyond this.
It's just the reason I'm not on the Israel on the side of the Israel killed him is just because it's not obvious to me how specifically they benefit. Right? Let's imagine that they had a kill switch where they could press a button and Raisi dies just in Netanyahu's office. That could just happen at any time, right? And my question is, why now? What's the benefit? What's the point of him dying?
Was it a response?
I don't know.
Yeah. Was it a response to the attack that Iran did kind of for show? And they're like, hey, we're going to launch a missile so that we can have solidarity with, with all of the people that we're supporting and, anti-Israel. And then Israel's like, nah, we're not playing around. We're just going to kill him.
It's just not a very compelling,
Sure. And
so here's an interesting headline.
Conjecture.
Raisi's death. This is Iran International covered this. Raisi's death leads to dual succession crisis in Iran. So a step of destabilization simultaneously combined with a retaliation. It's like, oh my gosh, yes.
That's true. Maybe they have a theory about the domino that is going to fall.
Sure.
That makes this a bigger deal than it has been so far. That could be. But
so
I'm just saying, it's not like a bunch of people inside Iran did not have really good reasons to off this guy.
For sure.
Can we then are we in unison saying that probably not fog? Or bad
definitely not.
No, because look, there is also the Kobe Bryant theory. Okay.
Sure.
Which you have to remember, from the moment a helicopter rolls off the assembly line, its only purpose is to kill the pilot and everyone on board. Okay.
Dude, I was waiting for it. In the military, man, these even under scrupulous or high scrutiny of maintenance, these things crash all the time.
What proportion of peacetime casualties are just helicopter crashes? It seems like it's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's a reason why the Army was like, hey, we're not putting real officers on our Apaches. We're doing warrant officers, these guys that are senior enlisted, and we're like, hey, you want to be an officer? Come in this helicopter. Sorry, not to say that if you're a
it's
warrant
like
officer,
a weird hazing ritual,
Right, exactly. That's so funny.
You'll have to test
it's
ritual of the whirlybird before
they
you
had,
can
no,
be
when I was in the
important.
Navy, man, when I was in the Navy, there was this program where you could go blue to green, right? And you could be an enlisted sailor, and they're like, hey, you want to be an officer? Come join the Army and fly helicopters. Like, and this is like right in the middle of like the wars between, you know, in Afghanistan and Iraq, when everybody was getting shot down.
Right.
And so like everyone was like, oh, that sounds great. No,
Well,
I mean,
and
we don't
obviously
really...
the suspect that no one has actually pointed the finger at yet, which would also make sense, is Boeing, right? They have a lot of good reasons to distract from whose specific aircraft are falling out of the sky, and they have a reputation for killing whistleblowers. I think they're probably on par with the Mossad when it comes to getting rid of inconvenient people.
Covering things up, man.
Speaking of planes killing people, did you see the one in heading to Singapore that had extreme turbulence and like 30 people were injured and
was it Thailand
died?
or Singapore?
I think they landed in Thailand, but I think their destination was originally Singapore.
Yeah, they hit an
I
air
could get
pocket
that
and
wrong.
dropped like really far. I don't know.
It's
what the
horrible,
exact...
but
Crazy.
yes. Anyway, so to that end, my question to you guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is
my super serious theories.
What is your initial gut reaction to war theory around, and the blurry line that could mean, around killing political leaders that represent significant threats to us geopolitically, to us and the safety of the West, and you know the different like there's a interesting argument to be had, or just a conversation to be had around like how should we feel about this? Like, is there it's never okay, utilitarian arguments are always off the table, because if you kill one to save a million, right? Like if you kill, like, is that okay? Is that ever okay?
Well, but the if you're just saying, oh, is it okay to kill one to save, you know, however many others, the implication is that the one is innocent, right? So
no, the one that is guilty, super guilty, is he's gonna go kill another million more people. He's gonna go butcher another 10,000 people. He's gonna lead to World War III because they're gonna lob nukes at wherever. Like, gotta off these people.
Look,
like,
if I was in charge, there would be a lot more people dying. Okay, that's
so context here, guys. Context. In the state, like if we went to war with Iran, I don't think either side would hesitate at killing the other side's leader. Like it would be a non-issue, right? If we were trying to essentially, now granted, you have to identify in just war theory, you have to identify what the purpose of the war is and what success looks like. And once success is achieved, at that point, the war stops and you move on. Unfortunately, it's a very gray area. So I think really here what we're talking about, the controversy would be, what about nations that are evil, have evil leaders, not nations that are evil, but leaders that are evil, that we are not currently at a, you know, conventional war with. Would it be justified to kill the leader? So in this, let's go back
which
to
is like for funsies, to be like, you're a bad guy, it doesn't benefit me in any particular way, and we think you should die, so
well, let's say for instance during the Cold War, do you think that it would have been justified if, let's say, the Kremlin was assassinated by the CIA, or vice versa?
The Kremlin,
the president was
the Kremlin himself.
Well, I mean,
the Kremlin is
it's a palace. The Kremlin is a building. I'm making
okay.
fun of you.
Sorry. Whatever, like the powers that be, right? The whoever's in
of the Politburo or whatever.
I don't remember. Yeah. Was it Boris? I don't know. Probably.
Well, yeah, Yeltsin.
Anyway,
was there.
Whoever was like, you know, one of the leaders
Boris,
in
good guess, though.
Russia. If he was assassinated, would that be justified? And the question is like, well, I don't know.
So outside of war, strictly, we're not yet in direct war with these people.
Yeah, but then you have to define it, because, like, I don't know if you guys have heard about Title 50. Title 50 is for the U.S. intelligence agencies, and it gives
like Order 66.
It gives the president. So this section requires a presidential finding to authorize covert action, including those potentially involving lethal force. There's some gray in a lot.
So that's like
an
assassination.
Right. So there was there was a book. Gosh, the name of the author is escaping me right now. I'll put it in the show notes. And she wrote a book called Surprise Kill Vanish, and she's an investigative
I've heard about
journalist.
this book. Oh, yeah. I just listened to a podcast she was in. It was amazing.
Yeah,
she just came on Impact Theory in the last 2 weeks. So like Tom Bilyeu's podcast, they did a part 1 and a part 2.
I'm not in the know at all. What is this?
So she's this
Go ahead.
author. What's her name? Oh, Jacobson. Annie Jacobson, right? So Annie Jacobson has done quite a few investigative journalism books. And what I find so fascinating about it, it's the kind of read that you could sit and listen from beginning to end without a break. It's so awesome because it combines some like conspiracy theory with inside information to her sources that are giving up information that may or may not be, classified. Yeah. And so she's done books on, the Pentagon's industrial complex, right? The Pentagon's brain, talking about DARPA and
she's
its
writing about
involvement
like
in
assassinations recently.
And in Surprise Kill Vanish, she's writing about assassination, American assassins, who are literally going out on the president's orders or whoever's orders and assassinating threats. And so one of the interesting stories that she tells is as she's introducing or interviewing one of her sources, comes and visits her at her property and brings some of his guns and his weapons and stuff. And she sees and she finds that there's a knife, big knife, a little stiletto, very, just pointy knife. And she's like, what's that for? And the response was, well, some of the assassinations need to be quiet. Right? Like it's to the extent where we're not just talking about like drone killings of leaders. We're talking about sneaking in and, Splinter Cell type Tom Clancy stuff where you're going in and doing a, cover the mouth into the jugular, like that type of thing. So to say whether we do or do not engage in that type of,
do either of you seriously think we ever didn't?
Oh, no. Well, that's part of this conversation that I think people don't realize is I think we are
everybody.
No, I think people are a little bit naive to this. And
I mean all countries when I say everybody. Like everybody does it, whether you're Russia, China, whoever. I think
people don't know that. People don't assume that. There's this vein of like everybody's good. We're all trying to make the world greener and hug a tree. And
part of that is because the actual quantity of political assassinations has been very low in the past couple decades compared to historically. It used to be pretty normal. And because of the relative peace that we've been under recently, assassinations, I think their utility just wasn't correct. Like the motive for doing it wasn't really there so much.
Some of them are just they're not hiding it, right? Like for instance, when Trump was the president and some Iranian revolutionaries or backed terrorists started bombing bases in Iraq, they guess the minister of defense or whatever for Iran, they saw that he was coming into the the territory, and they launched a drone strike that was not explosive. It was literally just a bomb or a cruise missile or a guided missile that basically opened up and was a bunch of blades and swords. So he literally just sliced him up like that kind of precision. It wasn't an explosion. And I think there's actually some footage of it online of a car, and then all of a sudden you got just so quick you can't even see the entry of it.
It sounds like the kind of thing like a 12-year-old would draw in class. Be like, no, this will be a sword missile.
Sword. I mean, that's true, right? Like, I didn't even know that we have stuff like that. But that was very public, and I think Trump took. He's like, that was the greatest strike. It was huge. Yeah. This person, Iran needs to go and pound sands. Like that type of thing, right? And it was very public. I don't know if there was any retaliation on that, other than, whatever.
Yeah.
But
no, I think the position that most people, because none of us are, I assume, I don't know, I don't know if Hughes is really a chaplain or not. Like, that's a discussion for another day.
Cover.
But I don't think any of us are in the position of actually making the calls on assassinations.
Right.
Well, I mean,
of course,
if you were going to have a guy whose job that was, you would totally call him a chaplain, right? Just as a misdirect. Like,
so I think we should.
Maybe that's why he's not here today. Maybe he had a mission last night.
I was gonna say. I think we should state explicitly, that
we're joking.
the views and and topics of this podcast do not reflect the U.S. government in any way. So that being said,
or any privileged
we'll just keep
information
an eye out,
that anybody
keep an eye out for world leaders. If there's a evidence or a word that a chaplain that has broken off and gone and assassinated somebody, we know where Josh is.
Okay, I want to share my screen real quick. This is crazy. So there's a list on Wikipedia. There's a list of Israeli assassinations. And it's super long. And if we just go to hold on, let me just go to the 2020s. All right, so a lot of this, I was just peeking at it, is Hamas. All right, where's go to
Gaza
2020?
Strip, all that stuff.
Right here. So August 7th, 2020, it says, right, this was against Iran.
Oh, Iran, okay.
Right there. So Abdullah Ahmad Abdullah was Al-Qaeda's second in command, gunned down along with his daughter by two men riding on a motorcycle. Mossad at the behest of the United States. Anyway, this is wild. Back to what I'm saying, which is, so a lot of these, they were attacking Hamas. But then if you hop over here to 2019 and you look at Syria, Malaysia, Tunisia. So it's just interesting. That was the chief of Hamas. So anyway, to my point, it does seem like more public information that this is a thing.
Right.
That they're not afraid to do.
Look, you get the first half of that list, and then other people who Israel doesn't like start dying. At some point, you just start assuming. Right?
That's true.
You
It's
don't
Wikipedia.
even need evidence.
It is Wikipedia. We must acknowledge.
Well, the cool stories. I mean, you got all kinds of documentaries about the stuff that Mossad has done. I mean, along with any. I mean, same thing with CIA. Same thing with Anyway, you have these stories, but Mossad has done Nazi hunting down in Argentina, right? Where they went and found these Nazis that escaped from Argentina, and 15 years, 20 years later, they, settled down, had families, got old in their 70s, and all of a sudden these guys from Mossad show up, capture them, kidnap them, take them back to Israel, put them on trial, and execute them. These things happened. In fact, there was that whole movie with Eric Bana, Munich, talking about the Mossad's operations immediately after Germany's Olympics in Berlin, or Munich, I think. That's why it's called Munich, where the Israeli athletes were assassinated by these Muslim terrorists. Anyway, so I mean, this stuff happens. It seems like it's there, but I guess to go back to our question, Nick, should we be okay with this as Christians? I mean, it's outside of the grounds of just war, and is this allowed, or can we celebrate this, or say, this is a good thing, or promote this even? Where do we stand on that? That's a hard question.
No, it's super easy.
Tell us why, Tim. Tell us why.
Well, so C.S. Lewis went over. I don't even remember which book it was in, but because he fought in
World War
I. Yeah, and he talks about the ethics of this, and he he even created a hypothetical thought experiment where he and an opposing combatant simultaneously shoot each other, but they're both saved. And he was frankly, I think if we conversed on our little float up to heaven, I think we probably would have found the whole thing kind of funny,
Yeah.
and so there is it. But the point of that is just that there's a clear distinction between our specifically Christian obligations, right? And the fact that we do have real, tangible, substantial, worldly obligations. And I don't think it's unbiblical to say that the Bible, that the gospel generally, and this is explicit, isn't intended to destroy or break or abrogate the worldly connections that we have to the earthly connections that we have to each other, right? Like, because that was the whole like slaves obey your masters. Like, if you're a slave and you get saved, Jesus didn't say, oh look, now you're not, you can disobey, you can do all these other things, right? So obviously, and that extends when you have obligations to your country, your family, all of these things. And so those kind of exist on, I think, a temporal set of calculus that at times only lightly interacts with your eternal obligations. I think the more realistic struggle that some people have, Christians in particular, is that because we view, well, unless you're like a hyper Calvinist, we view all people as redeemable.
Yeah.
Right? And that's very clear, because one of the glorious aspects of redemption is that God can do it for anybody. Right? There's no one.
He was killing Christians left and right.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so there's this tension there where people think, wait, if I'm happy that justice, right, if you want to view it that way, that someone has had their life violently cut short, and that's in keeping with their own actions, their own violent perpetrations in their own life, am I a bad person? Like, am I misaligned with my Christian virtues because I look at that and think, yes, good? And I don't think so. I think that we, especially if you're not in the position of making that decision, God chooses the time, fundamentally. And sometimes, you have a lot of opportunities. He's very patient. And then one day, your opportunity is gone, right? And then it's God executing eternal judgment. And so why are you sitting there acting like you need to be sorrowful over someone that God has now chosen to consign to eternal punishment? Like, it's not your call, it's his. And the fact that you as a redeemed Christian have been saved from that doesn't change the fact that all of you deserved it, and it's the most just thing in the world, even though it's not the will of God that any should actually come to that. So, like, it's just like, for me, the question, are you more gracious than God? Right? When you decide to, be super sad for all of these judgments that God ultimately is the one making. Because that's why we think we're supposed to be sad about it, is because the unredeemed evil person went to hell. Right? If we don't, the whole point of how Christians approach death, where is your sting, is that we don't get that concerned.
Right.
In an eternal standpoint, because where is your sting? If a Christian dies, it's like, well, to die is gain.
Kind of following up with that, Tim, I think there's some things to be mentioned on the perspective of Christians where death is not something to be maybe feared, because we don't see it as the end. If you look at the early church, and this is an interesting thing that I've been kind of looking into and reading recently, but you had a massive amount of Christian conversions in the early church before 70 AD. And then you had the Jewish wars, where the Romans came in and set up an encampment around Jerusalem, basically starved them out, killed everybody, basically got rid of the zealots and everything. What's interesting about that is there's not a whole lot of documentation. In fact, there seems to be documentation and talks about the latter of Christian Jews that lived in Jerusalem did not participate in the battle against the Romans. In fact, there was a very much of this stance of like, hey, we're Jewish, but we're not them, right? Like, we're not Jewish to the extent of we're the ones rebelling against you, right? So there was this kind of this idea of like maybe moving away, and also following. So a lot of pacifists, for instance, have utilized that type of history. Now, I think out of context, probably.
I think that is out of context. Yeah.
Exactly. But I also think too, it's like, look, we don't have any loyalties to the temple. We are the temple, right? Like there was no loyalty essentially to.
I would expect that Judaism. That was more an outgrowth of Christian Jews who recognized that their previous national ethnic identity as Jews had been fulfilled, right, in the the true church,
Sure.
right, of believers.
And following that, there was, in the early church fathers have written about certain controversies of the question of, can a Christian serve in the military because they're going to be killing people? Is that something that is allotted? And there was disagreements on both sides. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, they're like, yeah, God puts governments in place. And very much like what you were saying, Tim, it's like, look, we're called to be, to follow the government so long as they're not defying the laws of God. And now one could argue what they believe is a violation of the law of God as it pertains to war and the type of war. That's,
but if you're going to withdraw from your societal obligations to, in the idea that is what's required for you to be compatible with your Christian ethics, then you would have to withdraw from everything. Everything. There's once you follow that down to its logical conclusion, it's not just the military, it's your taxes, right? I mean, think about all of the things, like you technically, I'm not advocating this, I'm not saying this is ethical, but technically speaking, you have the ability to stop funding things that you might disagree with through your government. You could. I don't think that we're morally culpable in that sense for what other people choose to do with the money that's taxed. Right. But that's my point, is just that where do you draw that line? And I don't think there's a consistent place to draw that line. You still have your obligations that you and all Christians before you in their own nations and countries and governments have broadly believed that they continue to have an obligation to participate in.
So let me ask this question, and kind of like maybe a role reversal, or maybe not replacement theology, but kind of a replacement. If let's say there was a Christian nation, all of the world rose up against Christianity, and all the Christians basically went to the United States or went to somewhere. I don't know. Let's say it's the United States because I'm American. But all the Christians are here. We're a Christian nation. Now we have secular Christians or people that are not actually believing Christians or practicing Christians that live here. But generally the nation very much is a Christian nation, kind of mirroring what we have in Israel right now. Would it be authorized, or would it be justifiable or ethical for the United States, being a Christian nation, for the, you can make the argument for survival that the world is attacking us? Would it be ethical for a Christian nation to go out and assassinate these countries' leaders?
To have a military at all.
Or to have a military at all.
Yes. No, do one of you actually want to take the pacifist position here? Because it's just me saying no to all of these questions.
No, I'm not taking a pass. I think I would agree with you. I think that ultimately, when the people use passages like "turn the other cheek," that's not to say that we can't defend ourselves. That's and
I've
again,
heard
a
people
slap
try
is not.
And say that.
I know
people absolutely do. Yeah,
a slap is an insult. A slap is not an assault. It's
turn the other cheek is generally it's generally invoked by non-Christians who are trying to tell Christians what they think they should do. Right. So here's
don't judge. What?
Yeah, here's a great heuristic for you as a Christian. If someone who doesn't believe the Bible tells you to turn the other cheek, they're saying that in bad faith so that you'll just take whatever they want to dish out to you.
Right.
Okay? And you are under no obligation to do so in that situation.
At the same time, I think that there is a rich Christian history of martyrdom, almost to the extent where some of the early church fathers believed that if you were really a Christian, almost like kind of, I've got my Christian badge, like we're going to end in martyrdom, right? And so it was the history, and Fox's Book of Martyrs, you have stories after story after story of people that convert to Christianity and are almost excited about martyrdom, not in the sense that you're taking anybody out with you, like a jihad type of holy war, internal struggle to, die and have, 72 versions or something. but more so in the sense of I'm dying for the faith. I'm celebrating that I am being called worthy of the gospel, or to present the gospel in a way that I'm being killed for it. And that message is amplified. And I was the vessel that was able to kind of be that amplification.
Well, that was exactly the message of Peter being being crucified upside down, was that he considered it an inherently honorable thing to be killed for the gospel, and he felt that was actually too much honor for him to even experience that in a similar form as Jesus. So,
right,
like, if you're just going to go by that one example, like, clearly that is the viewpoint. But also, you're talking about people who are martyred specifically for the gospel,
right,
unambiguously.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's a different category than war and a country's war. So, I think the stance that I would take, I think if you're part, and if Josh were here, he would say, listen, come really close. Let me tell you something really close.
He would say, his part. Yeah.
You have been given a responsibility being an American citizen, and it's what you do with that freedom that you're going to be judged on. Like, if you think that you're not going to be held accountable for what you are given as a citizen in this country, if you're an American, like, you have the freedom of religion, you have the freedom of speech, you have the freedom to do all these things. Contrast that to the underground church in China, the underground church in Iran. So I think that the stance is like, look, God puts governments in place, and we are obligated to essentially be loyal to loyal citizens, upstanding citizens to our governments, regardless of where we are, so long as they don't violate God's law, and they don't, you could argue if it's sinful or not, or the kind of the tyranny that it's, there's different ways, like Bonhoeffer, for instance,
I was going to go there. Yeah.
Went and tried to overthrow Hitler, and actively worked to oppose Hitler, because the ideologies and the things that they were doing were very anti-Christ, right? So there's, to that extent, I would say, we're supposed to be upstanding citizens, and in the Old Testament, it's like, look, you serve God by serving Babylon, when you're in exile, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? If you're going to stand before the throne after dying because you picked a fight, you'd really rather be able to say and have it affirmed that you did it for the sake of the gospel, right?
Right. Yeah.
Where exactly that line is when, like, it comes to Nazi Germany, like, that's probably a little more straightforward.
Yeah.
Then, like,
well,
I don't like
sometimes
the way my
it's
taxes
straightforward, and sometimes it's not. Like, did you guys see the movie Oppenheimer?
Yes. Oh, not the
right?
movie.
No.
No. Did the movie come out yet? I thought there is a movie Oppenheimer that's coming out, I think, on Angel Studio.
Out. It just sounded really boring.
Oh.
What? You didn't watch it?
I haven't watched it. That's not a review. It
what
just
was the
sounded
one with Tom
really
Cruise?
dry.
What was the one with Tom Cruise
Tom
where he goes and he tried to assassinate Hitler? No.
Oh, you're thinking of Inglourious Bastards.
No. Tom Cruise wasn't in that one.
Another great.
Anyway,
that was
Bonhoeffer
Brad Pitt.
was involved in the movie with but yeah, no.
To my point about the Bonhoeffer movie, and kind of ties in the conversation around if we were a pure and unadulterated Christian nation, right? Like, the development of the atomic bomb and the history of what took place was the Germans were in a race, the Russians were in the race, and then the Americans were like, well, we better join this race and win, because the other parties that could beat us there's much more detriment if they were to succeed in beating us. And then this does get into an interesting conversation, because, the whole, you have to be strong to be able to defend yourself. A purely, like, if it, it's curious to play around with the idea of, like, what if the US had said no, because that is wrong, because that kind of technology, the ability to kill that many people, and then we had just decided we were never going to do it, which would have meant Russia and Germany would have acquired that technology and we would not have. I mean, we wouldn't be living in the world that we are today. And then
what's that alternative history show where that happened?
To Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? Like, what do we do with that?
Oh, I learned about a new conspiracy theory this week. We don't have to go into it, but I want to know if you guys had heard of this.
Conspiracy theory podcast.
Is that
I love it.
I'm not advocating for it. I just sometimes you hear about like positions that non-trivial numbers of people hold, and you're like, really? And this one was that we never actually dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima.
Dude,
have you
that's
heard about
insane.
this?
I think maybe in some fringe outlier thing, I did hear something like that at some point.
Really quick, going back, because I think I misheard. Did you say Oppenheimer or Bonhoeffer, the movie?
He said Oppenheimer.
I said Oppenheimer.
Oh, my goodness.
Is that not right?
Misheard that. I think I want to edit that out, because I'm like, Bonhoeffer. There is a Bonhoeffer movie.
It's fine.
I was talking about
good
Bonhoeffer.
content.
You're talking about
content.
Oppenheimer.
Good stuff.
Leave it in. Leave it in.
I have seen Oppenheimer. Yes, I did. My goodness.
Speaking of Bonhoeffer,
I still have not seen Oppenheimer.
Let's go back to Bonhoeffer. The second best compliment I've ever been given was my friend said, Nick, if you were like Bonhoeffer, because if you lived in a world where, Hitler was your head of state, you'd be acting like Bonhoeffer did too. And I was like, ooh, I like how that feels. Such a compliment.
Well, gosh, there's a lot of missionaries that are operating underground in, North Korea, Iran, China, a lot of persecuted places.
North Korea?
Yeah.
There are, yeah.
I'm just surprised that's possible, is all.
It's crazy. Well, I think that there is the facade that it is impenetrable. Like that you can't get in and out of it. I think that there are ways that you can get in and out of it if you're a single person, or a lot of times it's through China, because of
fair. That's true. They do have a lot of industrial, low skill labor that commutes across to
So there is that.
There's a lot of
Chinese, but there's a lot of people
in North Korea
that operate in that. In fact, it's funny. You talk about like missionary work. It was very much almost like CIA work or like spy work. Like you go into a place, you go and you're looking for like villages or something. And I think actually this is something that Josh did when he was a missionary in China. He would go into villages and find these villages that were not mapped and bring Bibles to them. And some of them he'd get there and it's like, whoa, the Jesuits have already been here. But anyway, like that kind of operation stuff. His brother actually talked a little bit about it on the Sean Ryan podcast, where he would go in and do almost like covert missions, and then when things go south, all they have is the SBC or the IMB, that Hollywood to rescue. They have like their organizations to rescue them. I mean, there'd be nice to have something kind of like a nation saint, to be able to extract these people
out. Remember that? Oh my gosh, you remember that? Oh my
gosh. Have like this
gosh.
awesome organization or something to go and extract these missionaries.
What Anderson is referring to is there was a time when I wanted to be a spy, and my undergrad degree was strategic intelligence, and this somewhat speaks up a lot of the things I wanted to get into and wanted to be a spy and tried really hard to do it. But I had this idea of starting an org. It's never going to happen, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you about it now.
You don't know that.
First time on record.
Sorry, I didn't mean to spill the beans here.
An org called Nation Saints is a corny name from the 90s when I was coming up with names. And we would be an insertion and extraction Christian entity built a lot like a spy agency, for lack of a better term. And it would be like full support for missionaries in closed countries. And it's like, I don't know. I think it'd be a pretty cool vibe. I could get
amazing
there.
Is that same kind of organization, like operational capacity, happened in the when they left Afghanistan, and there were a lot of Americans and there were a lot of allies and interpreters that were left behind. And you had Tim Kennedy, who actually told this story on the Sean Ryan podcast. mention him a lot. Maybe I should put a link in his podcast.
Sean,
but
if you want to come on, let us know.
Yeah, let us know, or have us on. Well, we can add some chairs. We can add some chairs. But anyway, so so like he organized, and it was a fully civilian funded operation where they were able to do things because they didn't have to deal with bureaucracy, right? And they were able to go, and it was almost like God had put things in the right people in the right place instantly. And there's so many stories of these stories where people that are operating on the tip of the spear, so many stories that you hear and you're like, man, no way that you can say that God wasn't involved in that type of thing, where everything just worked out perfectly to get the things done that they got done. It's miraculous. Couldn't happened any other way, right? So really cool stuff in that regard. But yeah,
one of the tenets, this is absolutely correlated to our conversation right now. Yeah. One of the tenets of Nation Saints is we would only use state-of-the-art non-lethal weaponry, and we would have like backup lethal weaponry for the if ish hits the fan. And Tim's shaking his head over here.
Because that's the kind of pansy stuff that I'm saying Christians don't have to worry about. You can shoot the evil people in the face.
At least 90s, 16-year-old Nick, we know where he lined up when it came to assassinating
pansy.
That was then. This is now.
Right, you have kids, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, take the beanbag rounds out of the shotgun. And...
Right. Anyway, I think we've covered pretty much everything on this. Is there anything else that you guys had to comment on?
I guess I just want to draw a line under one aspect of it and say the Bible, Old New Testament, is clear. The reason for the law is to restrain sin. Right? Nobody's saved by it. We know that, but it exists for a reason.
That's
there
a good
are
point.
Real, tangible goods and evils. And so to the extent that law is manifested by the collective movings of a nation or people who are trying to hold other people accountable, right, for their transgressions of it, totally appropriate. And it's not something you have to feel like you have to gin up regret and sorrow about having been appropriately a defender of innocent, weak people who have been subject to the hand. And I go back to Job, where he is being being put on trial in absentia in the kingdom, in the throne room of God, or however it was. And God is listing the virtues of Job, talking about all the reasons he is, perfect, which was God's word. He said perfect. And one of the chief virtues that he attributed to Job was that he broke the jaws of the wicked. Okay?
Oh, I've never heard this before.
Really? Yeah.
Not
and
I don't
it goes
read
on
my Bible, but
length.
just this is a good focus.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's this lengthy portion where, because Job's friends show up and they're criticizing, and so Job goes on this long monologue about basically who he was, all the things that he does. He's a father to the fatherless, he's the joy to the widow, and he breaks the jaws of the wicked, right? And so this is a guy who was said in the kingdom of heaven by God, consider my servant Job perfect. And these are the kinds of things that he did. And he was a powerful man. He was obviously a guy of some kind of governmental authority. He apparently just had the resources and the authority to mete out punishment, and he did. So there's a lot of room in a Christian life for executing wise authority against people who are transgressing God's law.
That's good. I like that a lot. Yeah. I mean, I think that's not a conversation anybody's having. And I think that's really helpful and relevant, because it's you do feel bad for feeling good when these evil people die, and it's I don't think we should. And it's not about how we feel necessarily, but I just think in general we should not be so afraid to shy away from that. And I don't know,
I think they load their conscience up with it unnecessarily.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, even walking around the world now that I have children, I find myself thinking about this a lot more often. I got into a conversation with our buddy Keller about this, where it was like, you know, when I carry my gun and when I don't carry my gun, back to killing, and I never would want to, but my personal model is when I'm with my family, I'm carrying, because I live in the state of Virginia in the United States of America, and it's legal for me to do so, and I have my permit to do so. And
Right.
and when I'm by myself, and I'm curious what you guys think about this, when I'm by myself, I never have it. I have my knife, which I always have on me. And
Well,
he
don't play
he
your
was
hand. Maybe he
I know,
has
right?
it.
Now
Maybe
you
he
guys
doesn't.
can come get me. Yeah.
What is it?
So anyway,
F
he was
around,
pushing
find out?
back. He pushed back. Keller, I appreciate your opinion. You should come on the podcast soon. But he pushed back a little bit, and he was just asking questions and trying to figure out why that was. And I think, interestingly, for me, when I have my family with me, it's a defense of the innocent that will get me to feel totally confident shooting somebody who is actively threatening my family, because my family is innocent and I can protect them with that tool. When I'm by myself, it's like, I'll run away, it'll be fine, or whatever.
All right,
like,
so let me challenge you on that one and give me a hypothetical. And I want to see if it changes your answer, right?
Yeah, let's go hypothetical.
If let's say you happened to be carrying, let's say you were out with your family and they went home, so you've still got your gun on you, you're by yourself, even though you wouldn't ordinarily be in that situation, right?
Yeah.
And someone starts to get mugged, someone else, okay, right? Someone who looks just like you, they're not carrying, and all of a sudden, and so now you're in that same situation, innocent as far as you know, person, now you have the same level of, it sounds like the same level of moral justification, right, for using that on behalf of someone else. Okay. What if that someone else is just you, right? You are the innocent. Your children deserve to grow up without a father. Did that guy's children deserve to?
Yeah, so my argument, I would have no problem, by the way, if I did have my gun. So, like, it's not like I wouldn't do it on principle.
But you're not preparing to do that.
I'm not preparing to do it, and I think when I'm by myself, this is maybe a poor answer, but I don't think I would get mugged, because I wouldn't put myself in a situation where that could happen if I'm by myself, because I'm more engaged, I'm more able to mitigate risk, I'm more able to analyze.
That's just as true, though, whether or not you're carrying a gun. It's not like you're going to be more likely to...
My family, my family's the curveball, because I'm not as agile when I'm with them.
Right. Yeah, but what I'm saying is you can employ all of the same avoidance strategies if you're carrying a gun by yourself.
Well, it's not just avoidance. I think it'll happen, and there's more options to evade.
Options. Yes. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say.
There are totally more options to evade when you're by yourself. Why are you taking away your last option?
Mm-hmm.
Well, honestly, because I don't like carrying my gun all the time because it gets in the way. But
okay.
Well, okay. All right. So here's the thing. I think that
I'm going to get you a Derringer.
This is important. I think this is important also kind of to speak to. If you're going to get a concealed carry license and you're going to carry a gun, whether open carry or concealed carry, there is a decision that everybody has to make of what are you willing to kill for, right?
And that's primarily going to be guided by the laws in the state that you're in.
Right.
Just
sure.
Unless
Which
it's
is
Colorado, because you can just shoot anybody in Colorado.
Okay.
Seriously?
What I'm saying is
Colorado has this weird law. It's called a Make My Day law. It's the most permissive self-defense. Yeah, literally.
Did they actually call it Make My Day?
That's not
super lefty
statutory,
has
but
this
that's
law.
I know. No, you can Google it. Yeah, basically, if someone is on your property and you don't want them to be, you can pretty much just shoot them.
I'm moving to Colorado.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, the point that I'm trying to make is you don't pull your gun unless you're ready to fire, unless you're ready to shoot. You don't pull your gun as an intimidation factor. You don't pull
Correct.
your gun like you're pulling your gun because you're ready to fire. And if you don't have to, good. But you're expecting and ready to pull the trigger.
So here,
That's
okay,
generally...
let me challenge that. And again, the
Go for
nuance of this depends heavily on the specific state that you're in, right? So just like firing a gun, brandishing a gun is a crime, but has certain specific times when it's acceptable, and it varies hugely depending on the specific state you're in. So don't take our advice and think, oh, those guys said I could, whatever. Okay,
this is not legal advice, guys.
The particulars vary hugely. Okay, but just from a philosophical standpoint, let's say someone's real close, like they're running at you with a knife. There's no one else around. Their intentions are pretty unambiguous, and they're yelling, "I'm going to stab you," and they're just line driving for you with a knife. Okay, do you wait until they're almost close enough to stab you to pull out your gun soon, because that's when you're definitely going to fire?
No.
Or do you pull it out sooner, and then they have the opportunity to rethink their decision?
Oh, you pull it out sooner, hands down, no questions asked.
Look, I think that's the safest way to go.
But I think
it's the safest way to go if you're going to
only pull it out, because the way you framed it, if you pull it out, you're definitely going to fire.
Yeah.
You're definitely willing to fire.
That's what I'm saying. Willing. That's what I meant. And that's why I said if you end up not having to fire, great. But
totally.
So that's the thing. Anyway, and also get insurance, because you're going to get your firearm taken away, and you're going to have that be investigated and everything like that.
I need to do that.
If it happens in Austin, Texas, you're going to jail and you're not going to get a fair trial. But anyway, that I digress. So
there was that Texan who was just pardoned because he was in the
BLM. I guess he was driving through, and this Air Force veteran who was a lefty went and basically pointed his AR-15 at this guy. I think he was a reservist that was coming back from duty, his weekend warrior duty or something, and he got like, what are you gonna do? You get a gun pointed at you, and he just pops him. And
is that what happened?
He still went to jail
crazy.
for like a year.
He was convicted.
2 years.
He was convicted of some murder, manslaughter, whatever it is.
So he was why my rule applies if I'm by myself.
Well, and that's the reason. If you need to do that, you want to know, because there's always the chance that some aggressive district attorney is going to decide to make an example of you because they don't like the notion of armed self-defense in the first place. And as you're going through all that, you want to know that you really didn't have another option, that it was either go through what you're going through now with whatever legal challenges, or you'd be dead, right? Because then the choice is pretty clear.
That's true.
Then
that's interesting.
This is interesting. This conversation kind of went into like a now, hey, what would we do? And I think this is a good conversation to have. I think that it's interesting. I wonder if it happened because just we're men and we're protectors and we're thinking of our families and everything. I imagine that women should also have this conversation, although I'm less worried that they would be prosecuted because, they had it coming. It does happen less. They had it coming.
It does happen less, just because
they would get out of any kind of prosecution probably for the sake of optics. I guess
it does come up though. Women, I don't even remember the last time I saw a story of a woman being prosecuted for firing a gun in self-defense.
You don't see that.
Like
can we just talk about that for a minute? Like, what the heck? Like, I love that's great for my wife. I need to go get her a gun, but it's like another reason why I don't want to be carrying my gun when I'm by myself. It's like, honey, you carry it. It's better if you pull.
Is the strategy if you're out and you're somebody's going to need to fire, have your wife do it so that there's less likely.
ladies, it's on you. You got this.
Yeah. This is the society that we live in. This is male privilege right there, guys. This is what it is.
That's crazy. Which it's not my core reason, but it is one of my reasons why I don't carry a gun, because I don't feel there are so few situations I can imagine where I would need a firearm, because I will happily kill you with my knife and not flinch. And it's like, whatever it is, I'm more comfortable in that situation.
Also, from a legal standpoint, that's not different, though.
Is it not?
No.
It's definitely different.
Using self-defense with a knife versus a gun? No, they're both deadly weapons.
In your analogy of the dude running at me with a knife, actually, this is perfect. Like, if I'm a guy who lives in a place that has that crazy district attorney and has some kind of crazy stand your ground law or a non-stand your ground law. I think Virginia, you have to retreat to your bedroom before you're allowed to shoot somebody.
Oh, so in Virginia it's weird, right? Because, and again,
but
this,
to my
this might
point
be,
with this analogy, if it's the dude running at me with a knife, I don't want to live in this world, but I'm comfortable pulling out my knife, getting into a tussling match, and ending him, like with mine.
Right.
And it's like, I'm all right with that.
You shouldn't feel like you're more legally justifiable with a knife than a gun. That's they're both deadly weapons.
I think that the likelihood of fatality with a knife is less than with a gun, right?
Nope. Knife fights are nasty.
Oh,
no,
yeah,
it's
they're
true.
nasty, and everybody gets cut. But I'm saying it's not.
If you're in a knife fight, you either go to the
button,
hospital in a body bag or an ambulance. You're way more likely to survive a gunshot.
You're definitely going to the hospital in a body bag.
Really?
Let's be honest.
Handguns are not nearly as...
What if it's a great axe, Tim?
We need to have Keller on just to deal with these.
Keller, you're on the next one.
Let's comment in the comments.
Yes,
all right,
this is actually very relevant.
What
would
is
you
more
do?
deadly? A great axe in a everyday, a sword, or
if
you
have
a
to pick a weapon to assassinate the president of Iran.
Helicopter.
Well,
start
we
making
know
helicopters.
That Trump chose swords. Trump chose bombs with swords. So I mean, I guess it's
metal.
My goodness. Anyway,
this was a good episode. Anyway, moral of the story, ladies and gents: always carry your knife.
Well, that just demonetized us, Nick. Thanks. Appreciate that.
I'm out.
All right, guys. Well, like and subscribe, and want to hear from you, and we'll see you next time.